as we get started. So welcome to this session, everybody, hosted by the conveners of the Post-Entry Academic Language and English and Academic Language SIG. I'm Sophie O'Keefe. I'm the Professional Development Manager at English Australia. Before we start, I'd like to outline how the session will be run. So feel free to leave your cameras on, but please mute yourself as a participant. Each of the conveners will have 10 minutes to present their experiences in this space. And then after each convener, we'll allow one question for that particular presenter. Then at the end, there'll be more time to come back to general questions, and you can address the question to one particular presenter or just a general question if you like. If we haven't answered all the questions, then the conveners said they're happy to get back to everybody with answers after the session. So please just type your questions into the chat. So I'm going to hand over to Marta Skrbis now, who's the convener of the SIG.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome everyone. As I said, it's great to see so many familiar faces, and thank you, colleagues, for dedicating this bit of afternoon to English language in post-entry space. So I'd just like to quickly set a scene from what positions the three of us are going to talk today. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Sophie, that would be great. So in the last 10 or so years, many of the English language centers have found, one slide before, many English language centers have found themselves in the very, very new space where universities were starting to ask English language centers for post-entry English language delivery, support, development. And universities have started doing this because of the numbers of the factors of the large volume of international students in their degrees, negative media that we've all been exposed to, a range of different dissatisfactions, including the student employability data, SES, and so on. And so universities were looking for quick solutions, for simple solution. And they've turned or are turning to English language centers because these are the trusted partners, so that the relationships that are already built, universities do understand them, and English centers have already demonstrated the expertise and success in these areas. So that's a natural partner for post-entry English, but that doesn't mean that everything runs without any challenges. So these challenges are often presented as a balancing act, and the university has certain expectations, but the university just wants a simple solution and a very non-disruptive solution. Universities are big beasts, and English language centers are suddenly finding themselves looking at their capabilities and negotiating with faculties through their structures and policies and processes, and trying to work out the funding models. So between the university and the English language centers, there needs to be a lot of agreement on how things will be done and who is going to do what, from the pre-setting up to the post-delivery. So everything needs to be very clearly articulated in this negotiation and relationship building. So today, Pamela, Kat, and myself are going to present 3 different models of how this can be done and what really works. So I will hand now to Pamela.
Thanks very much, Marta. So next slide, please, Sophie. So I'm Pamela Humphreys, and I'm the director of the Macquarie University International College and English Language Centre. And right now you're looking at my slide and you're thinking that maybe I've had an aberration because it says Griffith University on there. I'm actually going to talk about the work that I did at Griffith, and thanks to Kerry Sutcliffe for allowing me to speak about that work, which is still going strong. I have done some post-entry here at Macquarie, but I wanted to share with you some of the learnings and experiences that I had when I was at Griffith that really stood me in good stead when I came to Macquarie. So I'm going to talk about the Griffith English Language Enhancement Strategy, or the GELS, which was really a whole of university approach that was basically the result of the Birrell report back in 2007. And you can see on the slide there are kind of 6 strands that looked at the whole student life cycle before starting their university program, during, most of them were during, and one strand that looked at the point of graduation. So it's very much a whole of university approach throughout the life cycle. And apart from one of those strands, the original 5 strands were driven very much by the Deputy Vice Chancellor academic. So it was very much a top-down approach. And it was progressively implemented from 2008. And finally, the final strand was implemented in 2016. So it took quite a long time. It wasn't something that was implemented overnight. And I'm not going to go through all the detail. You may have heard me speak on it before. You might have read some of my papers on it. But essentially, the original strategy was a combination of credit bearing, non-credit bearing, a focus on academic as well as social. And it was co-delivered by the English Language Institute and the Department of Applied Linguistics. So we had a considerable collaboration there. We reported regularly to the English Language Working Party on everything that was happening, the implementation, the numbers, the impact, etc., over many years. And we got real traction. We had great positive and measurable outcomes, and we built considerable trust, and we'd become very confident that we were doing the right thing over a number of years. But what I'd like to talk to you specifically about today, next slide, Sophie, please, is the final strand, which is the one that's circled there, the postgraduate English language enhancement. And myself and a colleague who worked in the applied linguistics department, we identified that the original strategy really had left a bit of a gap for postgrads. So we recommended that we implement something for postgraduate students. And before we did that, we took 2 years to do 3 strands of research internally with our academics, nationally with academic language and learning specialists. And we also tested our postgrad students on entry. And together with those 3 strands of qual and quant research, we presented to the English Language Working Party, and we recommended that we should implement what we called adjunct tutorials. So this means tutorials in addition to their regular lectures, workshops, etc., delivered by the academic. We would add an extra tutorial to focus on academic language and learning. It would be free to them, free to the students, free to the academics. We thought this was a great idea. We got the approval of the English Language Working Party for the 2-year trial, and we went in all guns blazing. Next slide, please. But what I'd like to tell you about was this case study. I'd like to show that actually initially it didn't work all that well. So what I want to talk about is how we went from failure to success, because it was initially a bit of a failure, but ultimately quite a success. Myself and the academic from Applied Linguistics and my boss, we went to speak to some of the deans and the heads of department, and they identified 2 academics who they thought would be very positive and very open to the idea of these adjunct tutorials in their units. And so armed with the imprimatur from above, we went to speak to these 2 academics, and immediately we walked into the room, we felt a bit of hostility. And it was clear right from the beginning that they weren't interested in this at all. And they felt that this was going to impact their student results, student feedback, what would happen if they got negative survey results, how was it going to impact their workload. And we really hadn't expected that at all. So we went in there with we've got this fantastic product that you really want. And we hadn't really reckoned on the fact that they wouldn't be interested in it. So we left the meeting realizing we had to abort, we had to take a very different approach. So after quite a lot of discussion, we went back to a different set of academics about a few months later, took a very different approach. And this time we told the academics how we would reduce their workload, how we'd get better student outcomes, how we wouldn't be messing with their territory. And we basically told them what was in it for them. And that was the beginning of a 2-year trial, a 2-year pilot. We researched, we reported back, and eventually that pilot was approved as an ongoing 6th strand to the strategy. And when I left Griffith a couple of years later, they had 18 voluntary units that had a postgrad adjunct tutorial taking place in it. And that had really been a bottom-up organic approach. So it was ultimately successful, but there were a few learnings there. So I'd like to share with you a few things that I think are recommendations that I've found from looking after all of the strands that I've mentioned so far. And that is, you really need to document, you need to report, you need to collect your data and analyze your data. And the kind of data that you need to collect and analyze, I put on the slide there. The first one is probably the most powerful, but certainly student feedback, testimonials, uptake, also important to report. Another thing that's important, next slide please, Sophie, is to speak the academic's language. And by that I mean, yep, next slide, Sophie. By that I mean considering publishing, because academics understand publications, referencing frameworks and standards, because they understand that too. They understand the research, they understand the literature. And on the slide there, you can see 6 examples of some outputs, research outputs from myself and my colleague, Ben Fenton-Smith at Griffith. And that's very powerful. Not only that, but the next slide, please, Sophie. I also recommend that over time, when you've collected enough data, that you consider applying for awards and recognition. And we started back in 2011 with applications institutionally, and over time we won a large number of basically the highest awards that you can win nationally for a range of the strands of the strategy, and ultimately an international award with the Pioneer Award in 2018. And again, that's very powerful. It tells a powerful tale, and it also helps you to continue to deliver the post-entry work that you're doing. So in summary, next slide, please, Sophie. In summary, what worked at Griffith? Very much leveraging a sponsor for a top-down approach, and leveraging local champions for a bottom-up approach. Throughout, it's really important to speak the language of academics, to recognize their workloads and their constraints. It's important to pilot and evaluate whatever you do, and to utilize any university governance and committees to get traction and to tell your story. If you can present, we presented about 40 presentations in about 3 years, I think, I seem to remember. My whole life seemed to be GELS for about 2 years. And to publish whenever you can. And ultimately, when you have adequate data, to apply for recognition. So that's kind of my summary of what works well. So what I'd like to finish my segment with, I'm going to show you a short video, and this is not a video of the work I did at Griffith. It's actually a video of the work that we just did at Macquarie. And the work we did at Macquarie worked beautifully, and I can see Luke is here. Hello, Luke, who was one of the people responsible for implementing it. And I really learned a lot from the work that we did at Griffith, and we had no problems at all with the implementation at Macquarie. And you'll hear the amazing comments that the academics say about the work that we did. And there is nothing better, so I will let them speak for themselves because it's gold. Okay, thanks, Sophie.
I got involved because I actually do a lot of work with my students on developing their writing skills. And I teach a lot of research-based classes. So teaching them how to write essays and so forth in proper grammar is very important. What we did is we looked at the homework for my students in week 4, and we did an analysis of that homework to find out where they were deficient in their writing and English language skills. From that, we developed a workshop, and the ELC people came around and with 3 of our classes, and they had a 1-hour session with them to show them how to connect ideas, how to formulate paragraphs, and how to formulate arguments.
Well, I can't speak highly enough of the ELC pilot. It was just fantastic. As a unit convener, my investment of time was negligible. I really had to do very little, but I got so much return. Working with the ELC staff, they were fantastic, really motivated, really collaborative, and really made every intervention specific to my unit. It was fantastic. Well, I think the biggest skill development that students get is understanding how to write essays, how to write reports, how to write those written assessment pieces that we ask them to do. And this ELC pilot was fantastic because it got experts in developing and sharing how to create those skills in front of students and giving them the opportunity to hear from those experts alongside the unit conveners that know the content and marry those 2 skill sets together.
Working with them is great. My workload is actually reduced because of it. So I would really say that they help lighten my load by actually helping me grade easier because the quality of the reports is higher, and the higher quality report, less time I take. So a little bit of investment up front, long-term dividends.
An initiative like this is so valuable because the skills that students learn are so critical to their success while they're at Macquarie, in completing their programs, in having the confidence to continue with their course successfully, and also to set them up for success in their workplace in the future.
Okay, so comments like that you need to bottle. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Marta now to talk about Monash.
Pamela, we probably have time for a question to you, if anyone has any questions.
You can just type your questions in if you have any.
Okay.
There are no questions at the moment.
Fantastic. Then I will continue with Monash's model. So Sophie, if you just can go to the next slide, please.
I got involved because
Okay, thank you, Sophie. Colleagues, I'm going to talk about Monash University Post-Entry English Language Development Model. So that's the model I worked on with many colleagues around Monash University and Monash College. So just to acknowledge a wonderful work of the colleagues from Monash, that work still continues. But also I need to acknowledge the support of DVC Education Professor Elliott and Executive Director of Campus Community, because it's absolutely necessary to get that support from the leadership. So to the next slide, please. In 2012, Monash was in a very different predicament from today. So Monash is a very large university with about 85,000 students, and from these about 30% are international students. So a large volume of international students, and a large volume of these also from China. So we all are familiar with those problems that we encounter with international students in the English language proficiency and academic language familiarity. So from the very early on in that year, Monash was in the stage where there was a lot of questions around English language proficiency and performance of international students. Those questions are coming from academics, were also coming from students themselves. Where is the support that we require? So Monash started to ask themselves, do we have a problem? Is there a problem at all? Because the notion would be, there shouldn't be a problem. These students have just came from English language centers or just came from ELICOS. They've just passed the IELTS tests and so on. So therefore they should be fine. So acknowledging that there's a problem is the first step. What was the problem? It's the next question. So why is there still a problem with English language? So that's understanding that English language is not a point of time. It's actually a development on a time frame. It really needed to be explained across the university. And then obviously the question was, whose problem is it? Who's going to fix it, and how are we going to fix it? So that was a really big problem, because we really, at Monash at that stage, we didn't have anywhere to turn except Monash College, but Monash College is a very separate entity, or was at that stage. The question also was, do other universities have similar problems, or is it just us? Because this is a GO8, so the reputational damage is always at the forefront of university thinking. So that was in 2012. So if we fast forward to 2019, there was a total change of culture. And I know that we have colleagues in this room that have contributed and worked with me very closely to this cultural change. And it's just really profound, because at this stage, at Monash, English language proficiency is guided by policy. So there was a policy development. It is embedded in organizational structures across the universities, included in the governance, and funded by operational funding and centrally funded. And it's definitely seen as a value add and something that the university promotes to international students. When we go to the next slide, thank you. So this is a suite of models, a suite of programs that Monash is currently running. So everything from conversational to academic English and so on. So a large number of academic and conversational and professional communication. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. We based this on the whole institution approach, but it wasn't a smooth sailing from the very beginning. We've actually, like Pamela and Griffith, we had to go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back sometimes. From 2012, we started to talk to people on the ground. So firstly, we actually needed to demonstrate that there is a problem, because the horror stories from lecturers and tutors didn't always trickle to the leadership. And the leadership is the one who is holding the purse and making big decisions. So we needed to trickle and to really channel those stories to the leadership. Then we were commissioned, so I was commissioned to do institutional scan and have produced a very comprehensive report, who does what and where are some of the gaps. And this report identified a large number of gaps, and university then, kind of was persuaded that yes, there is a problem and probably we have to do something about it, but that still wasn't very clear. We had to link a lot of data to a loss of revenue, to a reputational damage and so on, to really demonstrate that this is an issue. The next step was to get together with the like-minded colleagues into the working party. And we were very enthusiastic, thinking we have everything in our hands, we have solutions, and we applied for funding 1 year, I think it was 2014 and so on. We applied for $1.6 million, and we were very, very pleased because we received $5,000. That really just demonstrated that nothing prepares you for these big failures at the very beginning, but that didn't stop us. We were very, very enthusiastic, and this paid off. We reconvened as a working party and refused to accept defeat. So we kept working on data and working with research and looking at what are some of the good models. I do remember going to Griffith at some stage, and Pamela sat me down and talked me through the Griffith model. And I went back and very proudly went to the DVC education and told her all of these, and and she just simply looked at me and she said, "How are you going to pay for all of this?" So there was back to square one. And so there was a lot of those discussions, but it really worked well that I connected, and not just I, but lots of our colleagues connected to champions. So different associate directors, learning and teaching. So people on the power, on the people of authority. And it worked because we showed that data, we could link data to the loss of revenue. So Monash was very keen to not lose any revenue, and every university will be in the same position. We went for the research-based approach with Arkudis and Kelly, where it says that if we work and share this responsibility, we are able to have an institutional approach. Also worked really well with providing all the research and what international students' English language proficiency, how is it developed, and that it is not point in time. We ran a number of pilots. Every single pilot that we ran, we evaluated. We developed a lot of evaluation tools and demonstrated impact, linked this impact to the students' performance. We reported on all of these pilots at all of the different levels of university. I managed to put us on all the different committees, so it was essential for me to be at the University Learning and Teaching Committee, and kept reporting on the work of English Connect, and kept reporting on the pilots, because that actually meant that people are thinking about it. They were able to ask questions, and I was able to demonstrate what worked. Influential champions are absolutely necessary, and I'm echoing Pamela here, because these are people with authority who can support you in those meetings, who can provide you with opportunity, and will really work and support your work. Collaborations are essential. We work very closely with Monash, started to work very closely with Monash College, and I know this collaboration has now grown to different new levels, and will continue to do so. And we collaborated with other parts of universities who were a little bit wary of this English Connect unit. Who are they? Why are they, in our sphere? Are they taking work from us, and so on? So we clarified, we worked with them, we crossed those bridges. And of course, like everyone else, we celebrated our achievements with various internal and external awards. And it is important to celebrate because it is giving validation to colleagues working in the space, because it's not always such a smooth sailing, but it's also validating university's approach and working across different areas of universities, because as I said before, universities are big. It doesn't necessarily mean that what one faculty knows, that other faculty will necessarily know. So celebrations are very, very important. So these are the major areas, and they are echoing Griffith, and I'm pretty sure they will be echoing also other universities' approaches. So I'll leave it here, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take a question now. Otherwise, we'll go straight to Kat. Kat, I think you are it.
Thank you. So my name's Katherine Olston, and I'm the Director at the Centre for English Teaching and the Director of Academic Enrichment, which is the Learning Centre and the Maths Learning Centre at the University of Sydney. So where Pamela and Marta have talked more about an overarching approach, I'm going to talk about a specific initiative that the Centre for English Teaching has been running in the post-entry space. And this is the Speak and Connect program. And it's important to note here that I'm talking from the perspective here of the ELICOS Language Centre. And I would like to acknowledge all the work that's been done in the post-entry space over the last 20 years by the Learning Centre at the university. So in terms of CET, the Centre for English Teaching, kind of getting into delivery of support in the post-entry space, what led us to be involved in this area? So firstly, it was the context at the university. The university was undertaking from about 2018 a lot of work into understanding the student experience and how this could be enhanced. And there was a lot of work done here through the Student Experience Survey, the International Student Experience Task Force report, which culminated in 2018 actually in the DVC education paper, The Student Experience at the University of Sydney and the associated strategy. So there was a lot of interest in enhancing the student experience at the university. And these reports identified these areas of need. And you could see these areas of need coming up across all of the reports sort of repeatedly in a way. So this was a pressing need to develop students' sense of belonging and connection to the university, a need to develop English language support, provide more English language support, to develop conversational confidence and also communication skills in English. And this really sort of helped to, I guess, propel us into this space, because the university was intensely interested in this space and there was an identified and urgent need there. Other contextual factors that led to us being involved at this point was that we'd actually established a really strong reputation and relationship with key decision makers. And as Pamela and Marta said, it's key to have these sort of high-level decision makers on your side in a way. And we'd done this through really through establishing relationships since before 2014, when we developed our academic skills for university success MOOCs, and they sat under the DVC education portfolio. And they were also really in the post-entry space, in the sense that they were aimed at students and helping them to understand and prepare for the academic culture and expectations of the university that they were about to enter. And really through that whole project, we did establish that reputation and sense of trust from the DVCE in what we did. And we received, I think it was in 2017, the Vice-Chancellor's Award for Educational Engagement and Innovation for that. So again, that was about sort of cementing our reputation, because really for ELICOS centres, often we're sort of segmented off into the pre-entry space. And it's really important, I guess, if you want to do work in the post-entry space, to show the people what you can do in this space and how you can contribute, and your expertise that you have to give as well. We'd also demonstrated through the MOOC project primarily that CET could be agile and responsive. We all know that universities often move very slowly, whereas at CET, for various reasons, we could get things off the ground really quickly. And I think, I know Lydia's here today, and she was a key member of the team who got this off the ground. I think we actually got it off the ground in about 6 weeks from confirmation of funding. So that was massive as well. Another thing that was really important was that we established clear connections and support within the industry. And this again goes to the relationship with the DVCE. So Speak and Connect was an offshoot of Monash's Let's Chat program and was heavily informed by the program. Marta came up and met with myself and the DVCE and other stakeholders, and she talked about the successes of the Let's Chat program, and she used data to demonstrate the successes, and it really went a long way to kind of convincing the key stakeholders that this was a good idea and that we could do it. So the Speak and Connect program is a series of 6 peer-facilitated conversational workshops. As I said, very similar to the Monash Let's Chat program. And it is aimed at international students in their first and second year of study. And the program supports students' transition and acculturation to the new academic and social environment by enhancing their English language skills and building confidence communicating in different contexts at the university, thereby supporting a sense of belonging and connectedness to the university. And we use a peer-facilitated learning approach, which has been shown to foster connectedness, build confidence, and lead to improved academic performance. And we always had, with the next slide, really clear objectives, you can see, that were identified by all this investigative work that had been done by the university. But along with this, we really sought to address the objectives through the program design, ensuring that it was informed by the literature and by evidence. And here I'd like to call out all the amazing work that Lydia Dutcher, Amanda Collins and Marcella Robinson did in researching and developing the program. They looked at various frameworks. I'm not going to go through them all here, but you can see them there. But the strength of the frameworks that informed the approach was the integration of the social and academic experiences as priorities of belonging. And we can see too, we really delved into what belonging means in the context of students at university and looked at the barriers to belonging, how belonging might be cultivated, and used these insights to design the program. And of course, looking at the connection between communicative confidence, competence, and English language skills as well, and how that contributes to belonging. So on the next slide, we can see Lizio's model from Griffith actually, and this informed a lot of the aims and the principles underlying the program. So on the next page, you can see the aims. So again, it was really about making these aims really clear for the students, really clear for stakeholders, and really responding to the needs that the university had identified. So the program, foregrounds on the next slide, foregrounds connection and belonging, sees English language communication as an enabler. It increases communicative confidence, thereby promoting fuller participation in the social and academic contexts at university and leading to an increased sense of connectedness and belonging. So just calling out to important factors, that have really contributed to the success of the program and also to building the quality of the program, which then also speaks to that reputation and trust that you start to build with the university. It's been informed by literature and evidence, really responsive to ongoing feedback. So the feedback from our Speak and Connect research project that we're undertaking, feedback from students and peer facilitators, from the CET team and uni stakeholders, and also program engagement data about registration numbers, attendance, attrition, engagement patterns. And we've always used this feedback to really feed into a continuous cycle of improvement and iterative development. And this has really led us as well to realise how, with a program that's voluntary in this case, which often these kind of things are, that you really need to focus on how to promote engagement with the program. And I've got a few strategies there, but I won't go through them now in the interest of time. And finally, what's of course really important is high rates of student satisfaction. And here we can see that we have high rates of student satisfaction coming back from the surveys. And then also on the next slide, we see the practical impact on students. And as one student reported, he felt really awkward when having casual conversations in English, which undermined his self-confidence when making local friends. In the workshops, he learnt practical tips and was able to relax and enjoy the workshops. And as Pamela said before about bottling those kind of comments, this kind of feedback is gold, as you can imagine. This just shows us that what we're doing is actually having a tangible and really valuable impact on the students as well. And of course, it's not just about showing that there's high satisfaction or having high student satisfaction. It's also about being able to report on those levels of student satisfaction and impact in order to further build your reputation, the credibility of the program, the momentum and the interest in the program, and sort of the ability to keep going with it as well. So you can see what worked at the University of Sydney. It's really just recapping what I said before. And also in terms of applying for awards, that's also another thing that really contributes to that credibility and the momentum of the program. Last year, we received highly commended in the Study New South Wales International Students of the Year Award for Speak and Connect, and this year we received the EA Innovation Award as well. So on that note, I'd just like to finish, but I am happy to take questions, or maybe we can take questions overall, seeing we haven't had many so far.
Kat, there is a question for you and I, and maybe Griffith or Macquarie have any of these as well, from Alison, who is asking if the peers were used, were they paid, and how did we go about it? So
yeah, I can answer in my case and then hand over to whoever else. So the peer facilitators, sorry, I'm just trying to see, here we go, were chosen. So they were actually chosen through quite an extensive process. They put in an application with their CV. The CVs were then shortlisted against particular criteria, and this was criteria that involved experience working cross-culturally, experience with various volunteer work, engagement with the university, that sort of thing. Then they were invited to an assessment centre where there was about, I think it was about 20, Lydia was involved there, so she could probably clarify, she's in here too, invited to an assessment centre with about 20 facilitators, potential facilitators, and then they had to engage in various tasks that would help the assessors determine the extent to which they met the criteria. They are paid in this instance, and as soon as they're kind of onboarded, we very much emphasise the fact that they are University of Sydney employees and they are obligated to behave under those conditions, and that really helps to sort of set the boundaries as well between facilitators and students, because the boundaries can often be blurred in these kind of cases. So I'll hand over to either Marta or Pamela if you want to.
Yeah, look, we also had paid peers, facilitators at Monash, and at Monash currently, I don't know, but last year we had probably 70 or so peer facilitators. They are all paid, and similarly at your centre, Kat, they were selected. So we recruited through jobs at Monash, and they were selected and then trained. Now, because we had a number of different programs, we actually channeled those recruitments towards different target students. For academic English, we only took master students in certain, linguistics or arts or education, or PhD students and so on. For Let's Chat, which was a conversational English, we took, any faculty, but higher level students and so on. So those students, again, were trained, but the question from Ellison is also around funding. Where does the money come from? Because they are not cheap. I would say that this is quite a heavy resourced programs. What happened in 2015 at Monash, 14 or 15 at Monash, when we started, is Monash had this wonderful program called, I think it was called Jobs on Campus, where they wanted to provide as many students with any jobs on campus, so that students who are graduating from Monash would have some kind of work experience already. And so there was quite a push towards those kind of jobs, and this was seen as not just waitressing or not just doing whatever there was on campus. So university did support these in the first year. But then I just keep going back and kept asking for more money every year and more money every year until we were able to successfully implement all those programs through the peer-to-peer. And this is, quite honestly, that's still cheaper than getting academics on board, but also works better from peer-to-peer. Pamela, did you want to add?
The strands that I talked about didn't have any students involved, although the Griffith Mates strand did, which was more of the social side. I didn't manage that, so I'm not quite sure whether they were paid or not. So, yeah.
Thank you. Then we have another question: how to attract students to those programs? And that remains a challenge. I would definitely say that students love to register, and we would have a huge number of registrations, but then the first session, because let's say Let's Chat was a semester-long program, so it's quite a commitment on behalf of students to commit for 1 hour or 2 hours every week. But once the students heard from other students that this is fun, that is easy, that is relaxing, that you make friends for at least that part of the program. Yes, there were still very many more registrations and attendances, but that was one of the draw cards. For academic English, that's a little bit different because they volunteer and come only if they need it. Maybe, Katherine, you want to?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. And in any voluntary program, we always see high registrations, and we're always extremely happy if we get sort of 50% of the registration numbers showing up. 50% is actually great. And that's okay in and of itself if you plan for it. I think what is also a challenge is once you get students there, how do you keep them there? So our program was 6 weeks long, and what we saw like quite good attendance in the first 2 weeks, and then after the first 2 weeks it really dropped off. So we then really, this is where on the slide before I had different strategies that we'd trialed to promote engagement, and i.e. engagement retention. And so these were things like we really refocused the facilitator training on how the facilitators could build rapport with the students based on this, I guess, the assumption that students would come back if they felt a genuine personal connection with the peer facilitators. And because a lot of the peer facilitator training was originally around kind of teaching methodologies and classroom management techniques, etc., which they really needed. but we realised then we really had to talk explicitly about how you build rapport with students, and that was even down to little things like, when students come into the room, say their name and welcome them. And it's things sometimes that we take for granted as teachers, but the peer facilitators, because they're sort of novice teachers or novice facilitators, they weren't necessarily doing that. Other things we did were we decided to implement weekly Australian snacks, because food always gets people coming back. So we had Tim Tams and Lamingtons and all of that sort of thing. We also, I feel a bit shy telling you about this because it sounds a bit cheeky, but we also implemented a reward program, because the whole idea of the Speak and Connect program was that students would come for the 6 sessions and they would be with the same cohort, with the same facilitators, so they could build genuine connections. So we wanted them to keep coming back. We didn't want them just dipping in and out. So we instigated this reward program where if they came to 5 of the sessions, they got a printed Speak and Connect calico bag, which they wanted. And then if they came to 6 sessions, they got, now I feel embarrassed, a snow globe, a Sydney Uni snow globe. And I will say everyone thought I was silly when I said the students would like it, but they love it. And it worked really well in kind of getting them over the line, or a lot of them over the line, and getting them to come to all the sessions. Of course, there were other engagement strategies, but they were the sort of key ones that we played with. Pamela, did you want to say that?
Sure, I'm not sure I can compete with Snow Glow. So most of the things that I was involved with, if I think about the whole strategy, the best way to get uptake from students is, sadly, to make it compulsory. So credit-bearing units are absolutely the best way to get everybody there, surprisingly. With the postgraduate strand that I talked about, and the work that we've done here at Macquarie, the best way to get student uptake is to make it entirely relevant to them. And that means, I don't know if any of you were at my plenary at the English Australia conference, I talked about the framework and things being embedded or integrated. And even if it's adjunct strong, it needs to be targeted at things that students care about. So you need to time the intervention just before an assessment is due. It's funny how they suddenly are interested just before assessment time. If you don't get the timing right, they don't care enough. I have also run voluntary drop-in consultation services. And the sad thing is that it's typically what we call the worried wells who turn up to those kinds of things. So it is challenging to get the ones who really need it to come. So one thing that we did at Griffith was to have a referral service where an academic could refer a student to come to the drop-in. Doesn't always work, but again, word of mouth. Marta and Katherine were both talking about word of mouth. They hear it's good, they hear it's useful, and word of mouth is probably one of the best strategies, but it's not always easy, for sure.
True. Okay, I think we missed one question that goes to all of us about bottling feedback and suggestions, the best way how to do this and how to present it to decision makers. I think we all touched on this. I would just say for some of our programs, we had evaluations before and after, and sometimes in the middle, and making sure that we talk to our statistics unit and make sure that we have all the GPAs collated and looked at attendance. So attendance, I know, was very, very important because we wanted to show that if the students attend at least 80%, the impact is going to obviously be, well, we were hoping, and it was, to be visible then in GPAs and so on. So lots and lots of evaluation tools at all of the stage. I can see Katherine and Pamela just nodding all the time.
Yeah, you go, Kat.
Oh, I was just going to say, Marta, that was something that we really took from your experience and how you spoke about your programs, was that real need to track engagement, track everything basically, and be able to report on it. Because we also ran a research project, so Lydia Dutcher, who again is here, is the chief investigator of that. So me, Lydia, and Amanda Collins were running the research project on it. That also meant that we were compelled to actively gather data, and we gathered it through like an online end of course survey, also through focus groups, and probably generally with how pressed we all are for time, we may not have done the focus groups if we weren't doing the research project. But that was actually a fantastic thing to do, because then you got out that really valuable qualitative feedback that you don't necessarily get from an online survey, even if people can leave comments. Because as you see students discuss how the program impacted on them in a sort of group setting, you actually get richer data in a sense, and that's actually been really powerful for reporting back to stakeholders as well, because particularly when you're reporting back to stakeholders like the DVCE or the head of international in the business school or whatever, often they don't necessarily have that much contact with students and student feedback and real student sort of experience on the ground. So if you can give that qualitative feedback to them, they often really appreciate it and get a lot out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with everything that you've said. In my experience, if you can get quant data, that's really what gets academics up in the morning, like it or not. If you can look at, have a look at university survey data, Marta mentioned them earlier, look at attrition rates, and base everything on that it's so important for it to be empirically based, research based. That's why I've said all the way through this, speak their language, that's what they understand. As we've all said throughout, keep tracking your data all the way through. If you can show impact, and it's difficult sometimes depending on the mechanism that you use, but if you can show impact in grades, pre-post, those who engaged versus those who did not engage. If you can get an academic who's good at stats, even better, because they'll do the work for you. But that's what's powerful. Yeah,
absolutely agree. And look, I did say that when I was leaving Monash, when I came to Monash, my executive director kept asking me for matrix. And I was just really perplexed. What is he talking about? Because the only matrix I knew was, with Neo and Trinity. But, he was talking about data. And we did all learn about this. And I'm pretty sure my colleagues in the room and still at Monash are very focused on that, because that's what gives you money, funding. From year to year to year, you actually have to show that you're making impact, and then you get further funding.
If I can just add one more thing that I've forgotten, because it was a few years ago now. If you look back at one of my slides where I had the publications, there are two publication journal articles there where we talk about exactly that. And we talk about the kind of data that we used and how we leveraged that. We used attrition data, grades, etc., etc. So if you're interested in that, go and have a look at that particular journal article.
And the other thing, how to present it is, yes, you talk to people that you're reporting to, but please, if you are leading this area, put yourself into the committees, because that's where listening happens and where the decisions are made. So more committees you are, yes, you'll be busier, but you go and present and give slides out and answer difficult questions sometimes, and that will also inform your practice. And you go back and you really showcase and highlight what your unit is doing, because as a leader, that is your job as well, and that's the only way they will be funding. They will be funding for you, and there will be a buy-in from faculties.
And just a word of warning, if you're not very experienced at doing research, if you want to publish on it, you need to get ethical approval before you get going. Before you collect anything, you need to go and get ethics. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Okay, we have more questions. What did you find? What was the best way to raise awareness among students? Simply via email? Okay, so for Monash, we tried email and we were told that email is for old people. So that's all right. We simply went, in fact, it worked quite well. We went via social media, but that wasn't fantastic either. What we did, we asked orientation organizers that we had our stalls on every single orientation on every single campus in Monash, but we also asked all our champions, so all the first year unit lecturers or professors or BBC learning and teachings or whoever we could, if we can come into the first year core units lectures in the first week. So we would send 2 facilitators, 2 students who were very vibrant. They would go in, they would talk about themselves 5 minutes, and here's the QR code. And I know Jo is here in the chat, and she was also doing that for us from the postgrad area. And that's what really got tractions and get students engaged and interested.
Just to add to that, we did start off with email as well, and got the golden the full international student email list through the equivalent of international office, and sent out all the emails, and that actually worked quite well in the beginning stages. But what we've really done as the program has sort of gained momentum and gained a bit of visibility in the university is linking in with this idea of being on these committees through like the UE University Executive Education Committee and the Student Life Committee. And on these 2 committees, we have the Associate Dean's Education and the Associate Dean's Student Life sitting on those committees, and emailing out through those networks as well, and sort of giving them, template text that they can then forward to their staff or forward to their students, etc. And so it's that sort of building up of the networks of communication, and also building up awareness of the program. So people start emailing you and saying, when's Speak and Connect running? I want to tell my students. So you sort of it again goes to that building up the momentum and the visibility of the program.
Yeah, I would say the same. With some things, we didn't need to promote it, to be honest. We were fighting them off with a stick for the drop-in consultations. Anything else, leveraging the academics and their connections, and when they promoted it as a positive, then we got the uptake.
Yeah, and look, I'll just add the invaluable experience with collaboration. So more people you get on board, better it is, bigger it is, more traction it will get. I know that at Monash College, the library, the faculties, they're now all part of the English language. I think it's still called English Language Working Party or Committee, and that is a committee that has a lot of that is a lot to do in the space, and drives agenda, drives funding, drives policy, and so on.
Okay, I'm very conscious of time, and I've been given the task to sum up. So I have 10 points that reiterates what we've talked about today. So there will be a test, by the way. Number 1, demonstrate the need. You've got to demonstrate to people further up the food chain that you need to do this. It should be researched. For example, you show the negative impact on revenue, attrition, student outcomes. That's number 1. Number 2, leverage a sponsor or a champion or early adopters in the university community. Number 3, build your reputation and your credibility and the trust amongst the community. 4, speak the language of academics. 5, connect, collaborate with faculty and recognize their expertise and their constraints. 6, document, collect and analyze your data and leverage that data. 7, pilot and evaluate. 8, keep refining, it's iterative, address the feedback, be agile and responsive. 9, present, publish and share your expertise, such as we're doing today. And 10, celebrate and get recognition institutionally or nationally to validate what you're doing. The test starts now.
Thank you, Pamela, but you forgot one. You forgot to mention join the special interest group.
Sorry, My bad.
Colleagues, you'd be all welcome to join, and hopefully in the future we get to share some other universities' experience and meet in this forum more often. So if there is no further questions, I would like to thank everyone for your time, for your participation, for sharing. So thanks to my colleagues, Pamela and Kat, and Sophie, who is always very supportive whenever we do anything. Wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully to see you all very soon.
Thanks, Marta. I'd also just like to thank our presenters for very generously sharing your wealth of experience in the post-entry space with SIG members. I know that a lot of our member centres are looking to work more with faculties, and I'm sure that all of your insights today have been invaluable for them. So thank you so much. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone. Great to see you.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.